how's Daddy about Cincinnati? What a team, what a team, what a team. Each man and lady from 1 to 80, how they scream, how they scream, how they scream.
Hello, Reds fans, and welcome to another edition of We Love Our Team. Along with my partner, Randy Freaking, I'm Jack Reiner, and we are honored to be joined today by Tom Tsuchiya. Tom is a Cincinnati native, and if you don't recognize his name, you certainly know his work. Tom is the artist responsible for the player statues at Great American Ballpark. In addition, he has created sculptures for the Cincinnati Zoo, Xavier University, and Miami University. Tom is a native Cincinnatian and a proud graduate of UC. Tom, welcome to We Love Our Team.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Randy. Thanks, Jack. Yep.
Hey, Tom, we've really been looking forward to this, particularly because we know you're working on the statue for Marty Brennaman. But first of all, before we get into all your statues and the Reds history and your fandom, can you just tell us more about yourself? I didn't know you were a native Cincinnatian, so we need the typical high school question and things like that. What part of town you grew up in?
Yeah, I was born here, grew up here. I'm a total Cincinnatian through and through. My parents were born in Japan, and they came over here in the 1960s. And then me, my twin brother, and I, and my younger brother, we all grew up here, born and grew up here in Cincinnati. It was early in the early 70s, just the right time, just the perfect time for being a Reds fan. And we grew up in pretty much mostly in Kenwood area, and went to Indian Hill High School, and then from there, as you mentioned, I became a Bearcat, a very proud Bearcat after that. And my parents were already baseball fans because, as you and I know, the national sport of Japan is not sumo. It's really baseball. So so they were these super big baseball fans when they came to the States, and it was just they just came, of course, at just the perfect time, in the late 60s. My dad came over actually a little bit earlier, 64. My mom like 68. But as the big red machine was under construction when it was being assembled,
Right.
And then of course, as you all know, they had the tremendous success in the early 70s, and they're culminating in their big right now, because we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of their big win in 75. So, and then me, me and my brother's too young to remember the big red machine in their total height. I heard all these stories, from my dad and my mom, when we were growing up. And my dad's favorite player is, Joe Morgan. And I knew everything about Joe Morgan, even though I never got to see him play.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I guess Morgan, I think we tend to associate Japanese baseball, at least back in the day, I think, with maybe not quite as much, home run hitting, but a lot of, good base running and fundamentals. And, they bunt.
Yes.
So I could see where Morgan would probably be his favorite player. That makes sense to me.
Absolutely. He thought he was just the best all-around player, just like super smart, just great offense, great defense, just everything. Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, a lot of base, he was excellent on the fundamentals, and that's right. Yeah, definitely with the Japanese, they focus on that.
So what was your era of Reds fandom? I mean, like when you kind of, 12 years old or so, who were the players that you really gravitated toward?
Yeah, so my era was definitely the 80s, and then culminating in the 90s, with the World Series win. And then so when I was the earliest recollections, the Reds were kind of like in the doldrums. Like I remember 1982 was kind of a nadir, fortunately. And I remember, going to Riverfront Stadium, and it was cool. Got to see Johnny Bench play though. But at that time, I think he was playing at first base or something. He wasn't playing as a catcher. And I remember and I just remember like, we're still fans, so we just went. But it was just, I just remember some of the heartbreaking losses. But I think the 81 was that one season where they were hot, and then there was that was cut off, and then I think it really demoralized the Reds. The Reds could have kicked butt in '81, but it's because of that strike and all that. And I kind of, even as a kid, remember some of that. And it's just like, those are bad times. But then was neat the return of Pete Rose, and I think it was really good, like getting the team kind of like back to strength. And then of course the late '80s, we can see the Reds really gaining extra power. And then of course 1990 was amazing. So for me, the '90 team that was just my team, and then if you had asked me what my favorite player was, I don't have one at all, because to me what was so special about the '90 team was it was truly like, it was the essence of what baseball is about. It was the team sport, everybody working together as a team, everything from Larkin to the Nasty Boys.
Yeah.
Did you play baseball growing up, Tom?
No, not really, not much. Because I remember just doing like playing catch and doing a little bit with my dad and all that. I was more like into running, because I was focused on track and cross country, and I was never good at like anything that required like any kind of sports where you got to do something right at this moment or whatever. I'll just like freak out. I was just horrible. So I'll be the worst at any of those kind of sports. But like long distance running, it was my thing, because you can have a couple of moments, seconds of kind of screwing up a little bit. It doesn't matter, and there's something. I just freak out about anything. It's just that trying to hit something at just that right moment. I just terrible.
Did your dad follow Japanese baseball at all
No,
while
not
you were a
no.
child?
When he came, yeah, when he came over here to the States, no, like not at all. He came fully into MLB. Now, when he was a child, I would imagine, but we never really talked much about that. It was more like really focused on just Reds. It's all Reds, Reds, Reds. Mhm.
You make a great point about that '90 team. I've always thought, and I've said this before, but in the '90 World Series, Jose Rio was the MVP, but you could make a really good argument for Davis just for hitting that home run that
Yes,
got it going. You could make a really good argument for Larkin. You could make a good argument for Sabo. You could make a
yes.
good argument for the Nasty Way. If there was ever a World Series where they said, you know what, the MVP is the team, I think it would have been that '90 team. It was
I
incredible. It
totally
was
agree. I totally agree. And it's like weird, because I got like every player, like everything, like I remember like Paul O'Neill too. He's always like one of those good team player guys. And then like Billy Hatcher. And I remember when he got hit in the hand, I was like, oh, it's just
yeah.
like evil, that kind of stuff. And that was the game, the final game. And I was like, oh no, we don't want to lose it. But it was like everybody mattered. Everybody was so critical, And I remember, and like you said, that's Jack and Randy, that's right. It's just like MVP. The whole team is the MVP.
So tell us about your journey that led you to become the renowned artist that you are today.
Yeah, so that all started. I just felt like I was born in the truly the right place at the right time. So um, growing up, we had the opportunity to go to Japan. When we went a couple of times when we were kids, and then when I was one of our trips, I remember going to this one temple that's in Nara, Japan. It's a place called Tordaiji. And then at the south gates of these Buddhist temples, they would have these big giant statues of they're essentially like bouncers. There's these big muscular figures that are there to protect their guardians, and they keep out all the evil spirits. And then and just like these bouncer guys, there's these guy like super jacked characters, and they're kind of like demon warriors. And then they're always in these dramatic poses. And I remember there's the one site, they had these two 30-foot tall sculptures, and it was just had a big impression as a kid, because it's like, oh wow, this is so huge and just dramatic looking, and it's just crazy, and it always had an impression on me. And it's like, wow, these sculptures are super cool with all the dramatic just pose and everything like that, and they got the mean face. And as a kid, that looks cool. They're like monsters and stuff, they're neat. And then so that had a big impact on just me getting into sculpture. And then later on, just always growing up, me and my brothers, we kind of grew up in where we had a creek in the backyard, and we would go down the creek and we'd actually get excavate and we actually get some clay, real clay, and then we'd make some sculptures. And then later on in middle school, I started took Latin with it was Sherwin Little as our teacher, and then he introduced us to like the Greek and Roman like art and architecture as well. I never cared for the language that much. I sucked at that, but I really liked the cultural elements, like the art and archaeology. And then so I got into the Greek sculptures and all that. So it was that combined all those things that's got me into it. And then from there, I was lucky because Kenner Toys, as you know, was based in Cincinnati. They did all the Star Wars figures and all that. And so Cincinnati had a whole bunch of sculptors in town. And then so I got to meet a bunch of them, including Larry Elig, and then who became my main mentor is Richard Miller. And then, but I studied with him, and then Karen Havenstrait was who was my first and kind of like the main sort of like person I was most close to. She's a renowned portrait painter here in town, and so I had those folks. I apprenticeship with them, and I learned everything I pretty much know about sculpting from Karen and Richard, and then the Kenner guys. And then from there, I just had, again, like I said, right place, right time. 1990s. At that time, all these stadiums and ballparks are going up around the country. That includes, of course, you got Cintas Center at Xavier, and then the Great American Ballpark, Cincinnati. And I feel like at the right place at the right time. I got to create the sculpture D'Artagnan for Xavier, and that was like the good foundation for me to get to do the Red stuff. And it was kind of funny, I'm a Bearcat, but like my first big project, I'm a total traitor. I'm a treacherous, guy, I guess. I thought about sneaking like a little, like Easter egg with like a Bearcat thing, but I didn't. I thought that'd be bad mojo, and that won't be good.
How did the gig at Great American Ballpark come about?
Yeah, as I was finishing up the sculptures at Xavier, then I remember in the Cincinnati Enquirer there was a whole story about Great American Ballpark going up. And then in the article, it said that John Allen, the chief operating officer at that time, as you know, he mentioned something about wanting 4 statues of great legends from the Crosley Field era. And then they wanted sculpture 4 of them to be placed at the entryway to the ballpark. And then and then they said something about, in the article, it said that the fans are going to select the 4. So they're going to be 2 hitters, 1 catcher, and 1 pitcher. And then the Reds had this cool idea, as you know, like the way everything's set up, it looks like the statues are playing an imaginary ball game. And so the fans are going to pick the pitcher, and then the 2 hitters, and then the catcher. Because that's assuming one hitter is going to be at the plate, one's going to be on deck. And so. And I remember that, and it's like, oh, well, might as well just try out for that. So I submitted my proposal to the Reds, and then there was I think about 5 or 6 other artists bidding on the work as well, and then I was very lucky enough to get the work, and I think Carl Lindner played a role in that because Carl Lindner, as we all know, called him Uncle Carl. He really is so proud of our city that he felt, hey, if there's a local artist who's qualified to do the work, he would really prefer that a local person could do the sculptures. And then I think that played a role as well. And I was very fortunate to get the job. And he felt, yeah, Tom's qualified to do the work, and let's hire this guy. So that's what happened. As the process was going, the 4 players are selected. So Joe Nuxall as the pitcher, Frank Robinson, and Ted Glazewski as hitters, and then Ernie Lombardi as the catcher. And then I remember at that time, then I selected myself just personally. I felt because Frank Robinson was even though of course Ted Big Clue is a great hitter, Frank Robinson was the better hitter. So I thought I want him at the plate, Ted Glazewski on deck. And then it was cool, and I thought, well, I can kill two birds with one stone, because then Big Blue had this awesome, like the giant arms that he was very famous for.
Right.
So, well, I can kind of show it off. He can be hanging out, kind of like in a pose that would show off his arms. And then I thought Robson has to be at the plate, absolutely. And then especially I was doing all this research, and it's like, oh yeah, this guy, he's also the best player to ever put on Reds uniform, probably. I'll say Frank Robinson was probably, even better than Rose and Bench. I think Robinson was the greatest, So I thought, well,
Yeah.
put him, he gets center stage.
Yeah. You're right. I love the way it's set up. I mean, the setup's awesome. Yeah,
It is. And then this is kind of fun too, because I thought, well, I kind of had ideas like, oh, what if, like, I can have the ball like sort of zooming off of Frank's bat or whatever. I was kind of had different ideas, but then I thought, well, we'll just make it imaginary. Let the visitors figure out where where the ball is. But I did. But when Joe was working, I was working on Joe's statue. For he would come down to my studio and just consult and everything like that. And then I remember when I was working with them. I joked to him and I said, hey, hope you don't mind, Joe, but I'm going to have Frank hitting a homer off your pitch. And I say, is that cool? Is that okay with you? And then Joe's like, oh, not skipping a beat. He goes, oh, no, that's perfect. That's, that's the best thing you can possibly do, because Frank Robinson is a great hitter. He's a Hall of Famer. He's not like a little squirt like you. Yeah. Yes, I love it. Yeah, Joe is he's just one of the best. We will always miss him. Super witty guy, just super friendly. The whole family is just wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's just one of the truly great Cincinnatians.
So why don't we go through the statues a little bit? You mentioned how Joe had some input in his statue. For example, how much input did the others have? Pete, Tony, Johnny, into the actual statue?
Yeah, so when the Reds decided to honor the Big Red Machine guys, that was about like 2008 or 2008 or 9, around that time. I remember then I made some quick sketches. First I said, oh, we can have these four represented. They decided, we're going to unveil them every other year beginning from like 2010, and then I remember that. So I made some quick concept ideas. I knew Pete was easy to do. I felt like there were just two choices. He's got his famous, crouching batting stance or his head first slide. But I thought it's got to be head first slide. So, and I think most Reds would agree too. So it's like, okay, that's easy. The Johnny Bench has got to be, of course, doing something with throwing at a base runner. Tony Perez, as the hitter. And then, but Joe was like the tough one with Joe Morgan, because he was like, well, great offense, great defense. Ooh, what do we do there? So I remember he was always kind of the question mark one. What do we do? And then, but that one there with like Joe, it was I think I was watching. I had the whole like DVD set of the 1975 World Series game, and I was watching that. And I remember like they do the split screens whenever Joe gets on base, and then that's kind of when I got the idea. Like, oh yeah, he's got that lead off, like that 12-foot, like from first base, to like launch and stuff to steal second base. And then I thought, oh, then that was how I came up with that idea there. But with Johnny, yeah, most of the people, I remember the general concepts, I'll come up with them, and then I'll present that to like the Reds, and they said, oh yeah, we love this is cool. And I think and Johnny, I had one where he's going to be throwing a base runner, and the pose was the ball was behind his ear. But then when I presented to him, he said, there was something he really liked the idea where it's past that point, and his arm is out stretched, and the ball is he's going to about to release the ball. And then he really wanted that, so I changed that to that pose. And then it's like, yeah, that's cool. And if this is what Johnny wants to be immortalized in this pose, then I'm like, sure, he's the man. So, and then that's why Johnny's his arms outstretched, and that one there, I had a chance to go meet with him down in Naples where he lived at that time. So I flew down there, and then and it was kind of crazy. It was like wild that to have Johnny showing me how he, kind of giving me like lessons on how to throw the ball perfectly, and, like from behind the ear and not straight. It was just it was like this. It was so surreal. Like I can't believe I'm here, but Johnny Bench hanging out at his home, and he's showing me how to throw the baseball. It's just so cool. And this was actually hilarious too. When I was going down there, I had a little clay model I started working on, and flew down like Fort Myers, and then it was on those little regional jets. So when I boarded the plane, it's like, oh, where do we put the sculpture? I don't know. And then I remember it just. I think the couple of the pilots were there, and then they put it in the cockpit. So Johnny flew down in the cockpit, all the way down to Fort Myers. And then on the way home, I boarded the plane. It was a similar plane. And so I went up, and there was like a stewardess there, the flight attendant. And I said, oh, I guess we'll just put Johnny in the cockpit. And she got mad at me. She's like, oh, you can't do that. We don't allow any luggage or any kind of item in the cockpit. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that. Then I thought I was laughing because then, these two pilots have some interesting stories, about secret that is only known to them and maybe some of their family or friends, of Johnny flying with Johnny,
Hey, so what was the order? I'm just trying to
Yeah.
who was first, second, third, fourth?
Yeah, so Johnny was first. Then the next one was Joe. So Johnny 2010, I believe 2011, and then Joe 2013, Tony 2015, and then Pete 2017.
And did they all have input? I mean, did each of them sit down
Uh,
meet with you to talk about
yeah,
how? Yeah,
a little bit. I'll say pretty much like when I presented uh the like the base running Joe. Yeah, Joe just loved it. He said, "Yeah, this is cool." He didn't have any comments about like how he wanted to be specifically portrayed. He just said, "Yeah, he just gave thumbs up, and he just modeled, and he just was there as like to consult in that way. And then Tony, yeah, because I had him like where he was going through the follow through. He hit the because I captured him in the 1975 World Series when he hit that 2-run homer, and then and he was going through the follow through, and then yeah, there you go. And I see you got the model there, and then the sculpture. Tony would just say, "Hey, my arm would be here or be twisted, my body be, at this part here and there." And all, by the way, like George Foster has been my main consultant through most of these sculptures. So when he did on like since as George lives here in town,
yeah.
he was consulted mainly even on Johnny Bench as well, just on like where every part of the body be located at the time there to be in that particular moment. He would pose and say, well, the foot would be here, the arm would be here like this, and so George was my main expert, and of course, as George studied Tony's hitting style, so he really understood Tony's style, and then I did get a chance to also go down and visit Tony down in Puerto Rico as well too. So he was there kind of helping out modeling, and then by that time the post was said, it was just more like just trying to get features and all that. And then with Pete, the Reds agreed, head first slide, so. And then Pete would just had like I got a chance to work with said that about like what angle he would be at this point. But then I just knew that some of that stuff, it's hard to know exactly what pose you'd be when you're sliding head first. So some of it, I kind of agreed with him. He might have had it a little bit higher angle, and I didn't really care for as much. So I lowered it, just depending on the images and all that. So I remember things like that. Just I'd work a lot with video footage and photos. And then, but a lot of it, they were just helpful. Like, for example, Pete said, yeah, make sure you have my batting glove on, it's like, don't forget that, so he always had that on. And so I just make sure little details like that were incorporated. They're important.
There's a pretty iconic photo of Pete, I think from the '75 World Series, going into third that I always thought might have been the inspiration for that particular slide.
Absolutely. Yeah, that, and also there's a famous, of course, that super famous photo of Pete sliding that was shot in Wrigley Field. I think that's like a one that shows from the front. That's one of the classic ones. But there's just so many great footage of him as just over his career, just sliding head first, and that was that was so helpful. And but it was interesting, yeah, because there weren't that many images of him I could find, where he's sliding feet first. It's always head first, and then of course, and then I was asked, and I asked Pete, like, hey, what, hey Pete, why did he always, it's almost always slide head first? And he replied, yeah, because it gets you in the papers. Yeah. And yeah, we knew that Pete always loves the attention, as well. And then, but I think that's one of the things that we always love about Pete. I think also is that he really understood what Major League Baseball was about. It's at the end of the day, it was entertainment. There was, he understood it wasn't just about playing baseball, but it was also making sure that the fans got got entertained to the max, and then that their hard-earned dollars was well spent. And then I think that's something that, aside from all Pete's accolades, all his records and his achievements, I think what makes Pete so special and such a great baseball player is that he really just made sure everybody was entertained. That he really made sure fans, just had a great time.
Tom, you mentioned taking the molding or whatever into the cockpit when you're going down to Florida. I was just wondering, could you tell us what the process is when you're meeting with the players, for example, when you're talking to Joe Morgan, Tony, Pete, do you have like a miniature model for them to look at and then it later becomes a bigger statue? Or how does the process kind of work?
Yeah, usually like the very first thing I do is I'll be working on I will be working on a computer model. So I have like a little software that helps me design the sculpture in the location. So I'd like build like in my computer like where Reds and I would discuss where the sculpture would go, and then I make a quick model digitally, and then I would put the figure and I impose the figure in that setting, and then when I share with the Reds and the Reds are happy, it's like, oh yeah, this look good, and everything, I get the green light. Then what I proceed to making a clay model, and then that clay model would be either like 1/4 the size or 1/5 the scale, either one of those, and then that will become essentially like the blueprint, and that's where I spend most of the time on, like refining, the pose, the details as much as possible in that scale, and then from there, once that's approved by the Reds and everybody that's involved in the process, then it gets digitally scanned and then enlarged to the full size. And it is then CNC'd out of foam. That's just good old styrofoam. And then from there, I'll carve on that a little bit and then put a thin layer of clay. And in some areas, maybe thicker layers of clay, I might carve away more. And then I'll complete that. And from there, that gets taken to the foundry, where the foundry makes molds off of that piece, and then they do all the process to cast it in bronze, and that becomes a big process there. And then they'll at one point it's in wax, so they'll they call it the lost wax process. So they'll make a wax copy of my original model, my full size model, and in there I'd often do details there. I do a lot of like little like cleaning up, like logo like designs. I carve in the logos, do extra detail work, things like that, and then from there it's cast in bronze, and then they do all the finishing work in bronze, and then they'll deliver to the ballpark and we install.
That's
So
awesome. Do you
it's a
keep
lot of process.
models? Do you keep the small models that you do? I mean, do you retain those, or what do you do with
Yeah,
them?
the small models I cast in plaster, and then yeah, so legally, yeah, they're the property of the Cincinnati Reds, so
Okay.
they own them, but they just loan it to me. So I have some of them. I have some of them are over at the Reds Hall of Fame Museum, and then a couple of them are just with me. But it's always on this, it's their property, But
Yeah.
they're nice. They just loan it. Some of the pieces me.
So, hey, Tom, so your newest project is of the
Mhm.
great announcer, Marty Brennaman. Maybe tell us about that process, talking to Marty. And I know it's going to be unveiled on September 6th of 2025. So people listening to this podcast before then will get a little preview, and then people listening afterwards will hear a little bit of the story.
Yeah. Yeah. So the Reds and I been working on Marty's sculpture now for pretty much like a year. I would say over a year. Um, and for the early part, we kept it a super secret. And so even Marty's wife Amanda didn't even know, and many people at the Reds didn't know. We just kept it under wraps, and then we announced it to Amanda and Marty. I guess it was when was that, in the spring or so? Was that I can't remember now. Yeah, just before opening day. I remember, and they were just blown away. They had no idea. It was neat to see their reaction. And Marty, who typically doesn't just like cry or anything. He was all, getting emotional, kind of like it was some tearing up. It's like wow, and he just thought like, wow, this is so amazing. He kind of felt like he wasn't surprised that at some point that the idea of getting honor in bronze, but still had no idea that he's going to get immortalized in bronze. That this is going to happen. But he said, of course,
Tom?
other places.
Tom,
Yeah,
can I interrupt you for a second?
yeah.
I heard a story from my friend John Burns that how
Mhm.
they told Marty was they invited him down there on a ruse. So he didn't know why he was coming down here. They just John or somebody just said, "Hey Marty, we have to meet with you on such and such date."
Yeah.
And the meeting is important enough that we think you ought to bring Amanda with you. But he had no
Oh,
idea it was about a
yeah,
statue.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, in fact, yeah, you're doing a good job at telling the story there. Yeah, because and then I think they said, yeah, this is going to be. I think they told them it's the 50th anniversary of the 75 World Series. Victories coming up. Maybe this is like going to be a big deal thing. We want you and Amanda down here, and then they brought him. The Reds brought him to the spot where his statue is going to be located, right at that wall beneath the relief sculpture, the Spirit
Yeah.
of Baseball relief sculpture. And they said, hey, Marty, we got the camera crew here. We got a bunch of those folks. Tell us a little bit about your feelings about the 75 World Series. So Marty started talking. Amanda's kind of, she was kind of standing near me. I was actually hiding because actually the funny thing was I was hiding behind a bunch of people because I was close to Amanda, but I was hiding because if Marty saw me, because like what would Tom be doing? Tom would be doing some sculpture related, so I was hiding. And then I think Rick or one of the guys, I think it was Rick Wallace, he asked, as we talk about these this 1975 World Series team, we're standing essentially between Joe Morgan and Pete Rose. These statues here. We're standing between these two statues, and I think he said like, what would you think about a statue, I think of you or something, and then it's like, yeah, we're gonna, create one for you this season, and he was just like, whoa, blown away, it's just like, wow, this is crazy.
Wow.
That's tremendous.
Did you come out of hiding at that point?
Yeah, then I kind of popped out, and then this is funny because Marty, right after that, he came up and he said, he actually said, he said like, you dick, and then the reason is because exactly 1 week earlier we're at George Foster's, like we did a roast, and Marty said, hey, what's the big project we're working on right now, and I was like, I'm working on, well, and at the time I was finishing up the Hall of Fame plaques at Cooperstown, so I was saying I'm doing that. But I said, other than that, I'm not working on anything else, and then nothing big. Yeah.
So here's the question. Here's the important question that people are going to want to know. Maybe you don't want to reveal it until you unveil the statue, but are we going to get poofy hair, Marty, or the way his hair currently is?
Yeah, it's the. I think this is not anything I'm allowed to say, or I don't know if I'm allowed to say it. Yeah, because
okay, maybe we should keep that a secret. But
yeah, maybe we could. Yeah, but I know Amanda. It's what Amanda wants.
Okay.
That's the. It's the Amanda's choice.
Pretty good. Now, I wanted to ask you. I don't know if all of our listeners know this, but if you stand at the Tony Perez statue
Mhm.
and you look up, suspended above the apartment is a ball. So it sort of
Yes,
replicates the home run he hit off of Bill Lee in '75.
that's right.
Was that you, or did somebody else do the ball thing up there?
That was me.
Okay.
Uh, and in collaboration, and with help from the Reds too, because I had this idea: what would be cool if we can have the ball represented, across the street,
Yeah.
and then so the Reds and kind of figure out, kind of did some math, like where would the ball be if at the point, at that point, in the hit, and then they said, yeah, it will be about like such and such height, and then so that's where and what angle and all that, so I thought we had to capture
Yeah.
that, because it's such an iconic moment,
For sure.
so it was cool, and it worked, and they,
Right.
it's not, I think the building might have been, wasn't just the right height or whatever, so but it's close enough, so
Yeah.
the ball, they did the little math, and it's like the ball would be at that spot, above the building.
I love to point that out to people who don't know.
Yeah,
I just say, stand here and look.
yeah,
It's
and
great.
it's there now.
It's a great end.
For safety reasons, the ball is not bronze,
That's probably
yeah.
smart. On the Joe Morgan statue, did you give any thought to making it a movable thing so he
Yeah.
done his flap? People could come up and flap his arm.
you know it's so funny, Jack, you mentioned that, because I did for a moment think about that, like, oh, that would be cool, he's got that arm pumping, move, but then I thought, well, the only thing of that is that I could see it becoming like a hazard, people getting
Right.
their, a bronze, getting their, someone's face wrapped,
Okay. I heard that Morgan's thing with
Oh,
bench was, you got a statue, I got a sculpture. Did you ever hear
yeah,
him?
that's right. Yeah, the rivalry between the guys are always fun. Just the banter between each of those guys are always fun to. It's always amusing, And I love how, like, oh, Johnny's like, well, my statue's the best, and then Joe's like, oh, he's gonna one up, because like mine's not just a statue; it's got that movement, all that extra movement. It's a sculpture, and he makes sure everybody else knows that. And then the fun thing was, I like to make sure each of the sculptures are really impressive. So I really want to make sure each of the guys are like, oh yeah, they feel that theirs is the best, they feel that way. And then like Tony's, I really like just that pose. I think it's just, I think that just from a strictly a pose part, I think I like Tony's the most, even though, but Joe has something unique with that really long pedestal showing off that 12 foot lead off there, So each of them are cool, and Johnny's is still kind of neat too, with the ball kind of flying out his hands, and I exaggerated the size of Johnny's hands too. So the ball looks, it's in that case it's basically like the regulation size, but the hands are just extra bigger than it was in reality. But it really shows you like how big, just to kind of emphasize the size of Johnny's hands, which is just colossal. Like when I met him, it's like shook his hands. It's like a tiny little child in his just giant hands, and of course with Pete, we all know with that cantilevered, everyone. I made sure every one of them were really cool, and everyone's super super proud of their piece. And then, but yeah, speaking about what's coming down the pipeline, we got of course Marty coming up very soon here, and then after that, I think I know Rick Walls said that moving forward, these sculptures at the ballpark would represent guys that are in Cooperstown. Yeah, so I guess it would be, in terms of going back in the past, it'd be like Ed Roush. In the future, of course, like Barry Larkin. And then who knows? I'm sure Joey will get it. Votto will get in. The Hall. At some point. So I think those are definitely realistic possibilities. And then who knows if Ellie De La Cruz, for some reason, we're able to keep him, we hold on to him. He seems like a potential Hall of Famer, doesn't he?
I'd like you to get Ellie like on one of those diving catches that he makes at shortstop. That'd be a great bet.
Oh yeah, yeah. And he's just cool looking too. Just he'll be a good subject on. He's a super tall person, kind of has a very skinny build compared to the other guys. Just a bit different look, the hair and all that. So it just need to have some variety, in terms of body shapes and appearance. So that'd be cool. So hopefully at least doesn't become a Dodger or a Yankee or whatever. But I don't know. Grr. There's Dodgers and the Yankees, and I'm not a fan of those. I hate those teams. They just the amount of money they spend. It's just not fair. It's not right.
Thinking about the 1869 Red Stockings
Yes.
sculpture that's beyond the Hall of Fame. Did you have any involvement in those?
Yeah, so that was actually that was actually my concept, that particular gazebo style pavilion. Yeah, so and that one I know the Reds and I were talking initially about potentially actual full size figures and all that, but I kind of thought that's just going to be tough to raise funds for that. It's and at the same time I thought that there might be another idea, some kind of a solution. At the same time, I felt like with as I know from my personal experience, people uh, love to or like to love to connect with the statues with if there's some emotional connection. And unfortunately, when we're dealing with people who played 150 years ago, there isn't anyone today that have that deep emotional connection with them. So I thought, well, I still want people to hang out and be able to connect with them in some way. So I thought, what about if it was something like a gazebo kind of place, like a place where people can go there, they can sit down and kind of beat the summer sun, the heat, and all that, and so I thought it'd be kind of neat to create something like that, like a little temple, and that's how that idea evolved. And I thought and of course Cincinnati has always been known as the Queen City of the West, and so the sculpture would have like a crown, and the crenellations could be the portraits of the players, and
So
that's what happened there.
one other thing that I found interesting just in doing the research was you had some help from GE Aviation for the Pete statue. Can you tell us a little
Yeah,
bit?
that's correct. Yeah, and it's really crazy. That one there is such a crazy story because for a number of years, I thought, I'd like to collaborate with those engineers at GE because they're super like amazing. They're amongst probably some of the smartest and craziest people around here in Greater Cincinnati. They deal with all these real complex engineering, three-dimensional engineering, and materials, crazy material stuff. And I thought that was kind of like a weird dream of mine. Like one day I want to work with these guys on some cool sculpture, and crazy. And this just was so weird what happened. So 2015 All-Star game comes along, and then MLB people hired me to do like a live, make a sculpture in life, in a live, at the Fan Fest. So I was creating the relief sculpture down there, and using fans as kind of models. I was creating the sculpture, and then it happens that while I was working on it, a couple of guys showed up, and they started talking with me, and they said, "Oh yeah, I know you're working on Tony Perez sculpture right now, and it's gonna be unveiled soon. And then who's next?" And I said, "It's gonna be Pete Rose." And they said, "Oh wow!" They all of a sudden they got really excited, and they said, "Oh yeah," and they introduced themselves as Brent and Bob, and said, "Yeah, I'm Brent. We're Bob, and I'm Bob." And they both are actively involved in this group called Let Pete In. They and they're super fans. They're like super fans, and it's like, and then they were really interested in this and asking me all these questions about Pete. And I said, yeah, I want to make him, of course, in head first slide, but I don't want some ugly structure sticking out his belly or whatever, And I always hated when you have stuff like that on a sculpture, anything that looks awkward looking, like I want it so he literally looks like he's just at that moment he's touching down and without any kind of structural support visible. And then those guys said, "Oh, we can help out in that." And I said, "Oh, really? How so?" And they said, "Oh, yeah, we're engineers at GE. At GE." It's like, no way. It's like, and it's like, I can't believe it. It was like these the clouds party and the rays coming down, like one of the special moments. And it's like, this is so crazy. And they said, "Yeah." Brent said he's a material scientist there, and then Bob is engineer. He said he just retired from GE there, but he's been involved with some other companies, so he's still doing some other stuff. And then they had a buddy named Tom, also named Tom, who's can do all the math and stuff. And they said we can all of us we can work together, And I said, yeah, this is crazy. It's like, yeah, let's do it. And then literally like a couple of weeks after that, we actually met at GE headquarters in Evendale, and we started getting on it. We started working on the plan right away, and then Tom Wallace was even though he's a Cardinals fan, boo. We allowed him. He said, okay, he was the chief engineer on the GNX engines for the 787, so we allowed him. He said, okay, we'll forgive you for being a Cardinals fan, and we'll allow you in. And then and then we had the bronze foundry owner Steve Jeezy. He came down from Indianapolis, and we all kind of met, and we started laying down the plan. Yeah. So, and then and it was cool because it was a great project because I was able to focus on what I want to focus on, the aesthetics and all that, and then the engineers worked on what they were good at, which were all the structural stuff. And I said, hey, just fit the sculpture or fit this structure into the sculpture that the design that I'm going to make, and just make sure that can hold 1,400 to 1,500 pounds. So that was like as if they had the entire Bengals offensive line sitting on the statue. As long as you can do that, we're cool. And at the very end of the day, they made it so that the sculpture can hold 6,000 pounds. You can park a full-size car on it in a Mercedes S-Class or whatever. That they made it extra strong. So that's incredible. And then, but it was kind of a challenge for them because initially, they started putting some budget together, and then they had these numbers that were crazy high, and I was like, ooh, because the way I work with the Reds is, basically, I'm responsible on the numbers. I just say, here, this is how much something's gonna cost, blah blah blah. Then they'd raise that funds, and then I had some rough estimates on some stuff, and then eventually we finalized. Even before I was talking with the engineer guys, and the cost is compared to what these guys are used to working, it's low budget. So it became a challenge for them because they said they had to come up with a design that's going to work, that's going to meet all these specs, and do it for a budget that was below what they ordinarily used to working with. So it was actually a challenge to them, and then they were gracious enough to work for free because there's no way I could afford them. They're working hundreds of dollars per hour, I'm sure. And so they really, I just said, hey, I'll treat you. I'm gonna feed you at Jeff Ruby's. We're gonna celebrate there. I'm gonna treat you guys there, and then I'm gonna have you guys opportunity to meet P and hang out with them and any of the Red stuff, blah blah blah. So that was the deal. And yeah, and they
Randy, it's good that you can climb on Pete's back and get a photo, and
yeah
it can
yeah
accommodate you.
oh yeah, you can sit on, and that was I say, hey, the safest, if there's not that there'd be an earthquake or anything like that in Cincinnati, but if there is, probably one of the safest spots would be right under Pete. He'll serve as a good protector. Anything falling, anything collapsing, and he's strong.
Is he the heaviest of the statues?
Yeah, he would be. Yeah, because I think he's like 1,000 pounds. With this, there's a stainless steel armature that runs through his whole body, and then we to keep the stainless steel away from the bronze. There's a foam that we use that's injected between the bronze because the bronze is hollow. It's about a quarter inch thick, and then we have the stainless steel running in there, and it's kind of cool. That foam we use, it's like a special foam that is used in helping the fabrication of the F-35s. It's a special one. It doesn't have it has something that could react or have I don't know all the chemistry, but something that would mess with the metals. So it's kind of cool. So we got that injected in there. But yeah, and the piece itself basically you have the stainless steel armature, then it kind of it exits out of his elbow area. It's like a prong, and these prongs slide into. So Pete literally is sliding into his sculpture. He slides into these kind of tubes that's buried in the concrete pedestal, and then so that's what holds him in place. So he's not going anywhere.
Well,
Yeah,
should we do some word association?
Well, let's do a little word association.
These are challenging questions for you. Randy's going to kick it off, I think.
Yeah, Tom, I'm a little bit out of my lane, but how about David versus the Pieta?
Oh yeah. So now it's interesting is that the Dan Patrick show, asked the question, which is better, David or my statue of Pete Rose? And they all and everyone on the show decided that Pete Rose is better. So yeah, and I would say we're gonna say Pete Rose. We don't care about the Pieta and all that. Now, by the way, now if it was between the Pieta and the David, I'd still say the David, but I prefer the Florence Pieta, Michelangelo's late Pieta. That's a really great one in Florence. I don't know. Have you guys seen that? Have you been to Florence to see that
Yeah.
one? It's in the
I have
Duomo
seen
Museum.
that.
Yeah, the Nicodemus one. I think that's a great sculpture. That's one of my all time faves. So actually, that's better than the David. So that the Florence Pieta is better than David.
When we saw David, my wife noticed, and I didn't even notice it, that his one foot, the toes on his one foot are sort of disfigured. And the guide said, yeah, a lot of people don't notice that, but somebody had come up with a hammer
Oh
several years ago
yeah,
and hit on it and
yeah,
messed his toes up. So
yeah. It was some crazy guy. Yeah, it's a shame. And I knew someone also attacked the Rome Pieta back in the day too, like smashed up the hands of Mary. But thanks to the miracle of epoxy, they were able to restore her hands.
well, then we had so we're going to ask you Michelangelo or Rodin.
Yeah, I'll say Michelangelo.
Okay.
I mean, both of them are great. It's so tough. It's hard to choose,
Well, these are tough
Yeah.
questions. These are designed to be tough questions. So.
Yes, these are. By Michelangelo, yeah, I don't know. Some of his stuff, yeah, it's just so awesome, amazing. The San Lorenzo, the Medici Chapel figures are really excellent. And then of course my favorite, the Florence Pieta. Those just that guy's just on a different level of awesomeness. But Rodin is this. Anyway.
Okay, let's keep it going with these
All
tough
right.
questions. How about something like Skyline or Gold Star?
Oh yeah. So, yeah. See, I may be in the minority, but I love Gold Star more. The Gold Star. Something about the spices. I love the Gold Star more. But this is funny because Pete Rose, as you know, he used to be a spokesman for Gold Star, as you all know. But I asked Pete, "Did you like Gold Star?" I said, "Do you like Gold Star Skyline?" He said, "Skyline." And so I said, "Man, like, dude, man, you're like this total sellout there, man."
I was
The
surprised he didn't say
classic.
Price Hill Chili. I would have maybe thought he would have said Price Hill Chili, but
I know, yeah. But he said, yeah, Skyline was thing. Just growing up, that was his thing. Of
sure.
course, I love Skyline too because I eat more Skyline than I eat Gold Star because they just have more outlets and more of the restaurants around. But Gold Star is still my fave. It's just
Nice. How
I
about
love this place.
how about for dessert? Then you're going to go Graders or Aglamizes? Do you think?
Yeah, I like graders. Yeah, I think one time I maybe had one of the Agamiz. I mean, Agamiz is good too. They're all good. But I don't know. I just like graders. Yeah, the mint chocolate chip and their I don't know, just something. And I kind of like their mocha one too. It's kind of cool. That I like that the coffee kind of taste one. Yeah, it's all good. Yum.
Okay, well, listen, Tom, for a long time, and we appreciate your time and thanks for joining us. And September 6th, for our listeners, get down to Great American and see the unveiling of the Marty Brennaman statue. That's going to be an exciting night. Find out what his hair looks like.
Yeah. Yes. Stay tuned. Yeah. To see the hair. So.
Well, hey, thank you very much, Tom. This has been awesome, and we learned a lot about sculptures today, and just tremendous. And looking forward to the Marty unveiling. So, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Randy. Thanks, Jack. Really enjoyed.
Hang with us a minute, Tom.
All right. Thanks again. It was fun hanging out, chatting, including the tough questions. Those tough questions, that about killed me. But I'm glad they were at the very end. They were hard.
The whole town How's Patty about Cincinnati? What a team, what a team, what a team. Each man and lady from 1 to 80, how they scream, how they scream, how they scream.